Join us for an interview with Stuart Langley, a food entrepreneur whose lack of initial funding helped him launch the amazing Disappearing Dining Club, a business that delivers outstanding pop-up dining experiences in unconventional spaces. Stay tuned. This interview will fill you up.
And we did the first party and we lost no money and, amazing. Then we did a second party and we made a small amount of money. And the first party was 30 people. The second party was 60 people. The first party were 30 friends who we'd invited. They all came back for the second one and brought a friend with them. That's why it was 60 people for the second one. And the third one, we had 150 people in the basement of a gallery and we didn't know a single person.
Okay, let's get into this. The restaurant industry is notorious for being a challenging space for startups and entrepreneurs to break into. In Canada alone, it's estimated that there are almost 100,000 restaurants, bringing in close to $80 billion annually. However, research suggests that nearly 60% of independent restaurants fail in their first 3 years, numbers that are consistent across the US and the UK. Those are hard numbers to swallow. Not surprisingly, many failures in the industry can be linked to being undercapitalized, through poor consistency, and according to research from Cornell University, through a lack of vision and clarity of purpose. With new options for diners seemingly launching daily, entering markets that are already crowded with established players, it's no surprise that to compete, you've got to be damn good. And this is why our interviewee today is so exceptional. After working in the hospitality area for many years, Stuart Langley was ready to take on the challenge of starting his own business. The problem, though, was the average amount of investment required to start a restaurant in London, where he was based, is over $300,000 US. Stuart had exactly $10,000, half it on a credit card. But as the old saying goes, necessity is the mother of invention, and Stuart and his partner Fred weren't going to be denied. To Stuart, the magic in dining is delivered through a culmination of elements: space, atmosphere, food, and the chemistry between the people eating together. Stuart and Fred recognized it was possible to bring those elements together through a non-traditional business model, one that didn't require huge investment. What originally started out as a pop-up dinner party amongst 30 friends grew to 60 diners and eventually to over 500 in one night. Today, with 13 years under their belt, and by consistently delivering exceptional experiences, the Disappearing Dining Club has grown almost entirely through word of mouth to serve hundreds of thousands of clients in architectural warehouses, unassuming clothing boutiques, and almost everywhere in between. A story made even more exceptional when you realize the customer makes a reservation without knowing where they'll eat or what they'll eat. In this interview, Stuart will share how a 30-year-long career in hospitality drove him and his business partner to founding the Disappearing Dining Club, what brings diners back, and why having no money at the time was a major advantage, and much more. Let's meet Stuart. I'm super duper excited to welcome Stuart Langley, who is one of the most interesting entrepreneurs that I've come across in many a year. He is the founder of a business called the Disappearing Dining Club. And I would just like to welcome you and thank you so much for spending time with us again, because your story is awesome.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
All right, Stu, so let's start by just simply telling us, what exactly does the Disappearing Dining Club do?
Well, it does a number of different things, but essentially we kind of come out of the kind of pop-up restaurant business. So we're talking back in 2010, which, based in London. And essentially what we did is we would host dinner parties in locations that had no relationship with food or drink whatsoever. They wouldn't have kitchens. They wouldn't be in addresses that anybody would want to necessarily go to. And we would sell tickets and we would throw a dinner party with music and entertainment and a bit of a party afterwards. And that's kind of like the core of the business. From there, our ability to throw a good party with restaurant quality food and drink in a location that people had never been to before and would never go to again. And if they were to ever go there, they would certainly not find any food or drink there, became something that people wanted for themselves. So we did a lot of private work on that. That became kind of lots of kind of corporate business, brand work, and eventually kind of lots of kind of weddings, celebrations, that kind of things. And then kind of
Including, by the way, including my own wedding.
including yours, including yours.
Mhm.
And then supporting that is if you need to cook a lot of food and if you need to look after staff, then you need to have a premises by which you do that. And then historically, over our 13-year history, we've had a series of kind of longer term temporary restaurants, pop-up restaurants. The shortest spell we had of those, maybe like 6 weeks. The longest, maybe about 6 years, leading us now to have a kind of a permanent public house dining room space now in London. But again, these places would be in some ways surprising. They would be over multiple floors of a independent department store, or they would be a restaurant hidden inside a clothes shop or inside an architectural warehouse. So again, using our skills of making something out of nothing in spaces that we thought would be a fantastic setting for food and drink, even though they weren't set up for that purpose. So those are the kind of the three areas: our own parties, parties for other people, and kind of permanent or semi-permanent food and drink premises.
So what I've got to ask you, there's obviously there's a magic there, and I'm curious, what is it? What is the magic? What is making people decide? Because I remember, you explained to me that, people will have to buy a ticket before they know what they're going to eat or where they're going to eat it, and yet people are filling up your events. What's the magic there? What are people really buying into?
Originally, I mean, food trends move on quite quickly. So where the world is now to where the world was 13 years ago is particularly in food, which is very trend and fashion led, is very, very different. At the time, the only places you could eat food were either at home or in a restaurant in London. You might go have a bar and have some nibbles, but what you couldn't do is have to go to a different place that was exciting. There were no night markets. There were no street food markets. So the idea that you could go somewhere that none of your friends had ever been to before and have a restaurant quality dining experience was very, very appealing. And now the idea of kind of experiential dining is quite a common one. But at the time, we felt that by this kind of what we think is the magic of dining, which is the right people eat it in the right place with the right service and sense of hospitality, that was the experience we were trying to deliver, and that we could deliver that great and memorable experience in any location. And in fact, the more unusual the location, the greater the experience. And why our business has stayed successful over such a long period of time is because we've never lost focus on those core things. And it is about the experience at the table that really counts. And that's where our reputation rests, really, which is our vibe, our staff, our people, our kind of customers who enjoy our kind of hospitality, which is supported by great quality food and drink, of course. And again, people still like the unexpected. People still like going to work and telling their colleagues about something that isn't there the following day. And I think that is where the magic is, in my opinion.
So there's a number of dimensions at play in creating that experience. Obviously, there's the physical space, there's the food, but a big part of it as well is that you're often seated with people that you don't actually know. How much is the chemistry of what's happening at the table, the interpersonal chemistry? How much of that is a factor, do you think, in creating that experience for people?
I think that's very important. It's a bit like dating, where you will turn up and if you're going and you meet somebody for the first time and you hope you're going to have a good night with them, but it could well be you have a terrible night with them, but you've still got a great story to tell when you see your friends further down the track. And the fact that you will be meeting people in real life, and it's an opportunity to meet people in real life. I think that is something. I think our dinners attract people that celebrate that. Again, in a city like London, arguably it's very difficult to meet new people unless you work with them, or they're part of your immediate friendship circle. So again, our dinners have been a platform by which people who have no reason to talk to each other start talking to each other. And there is a very valuable filter, which is the fact they're at Disappearing Dining Club. They've chosen, of all the restaurants in London to be at that they could have been at, they've chosen to come to us. They've chosen to go down a back alley in Hackney to find themselves in an old factory that's been turned into a dining room for the night. They've taken them down through some dodgy railway arches in Bermondsey to find themselves in an architectural salvage yard and have cocktails there. The locations and the sense of the unexpected is exciting, but it also provides a filter for the kind of people that are attracted to those things, which means everyone's got something to talk about when they sit next to each other at the table.
It's interesting because you're right. It really does attract a very particular type of person who is more excited by the uncertainty than they are put off by it. And it'd be interesting to actually analyze a little bit of the character of those people, in a broader sense, because they are a different breed. It strikes me. So over the last 13 years, how many people have you actually served?
I mean, hundreds of thousands. It's difficult to say. We've done so many things, and some at such scale. We were doing. We did a series of vast New Year's Eve dinner parties, for instance, in a big old warehouse in Docklands, just opposite Canary Wharf, and we would seat 600 people for a New Year's Eve dinner on great big long tables with people not knowing each other. And then once dinner was finished at 10 o'clock, we'd then bring another 600 people in for a party afterwards, which would go on until 5-6 in the morning, So that is a lot of people. And, so we would do events at that scale, but equally we've been paid a good amount of money to do an incredibly intimate dinner for 2 people on a boat in the Thames. It's kind of like the scale of it is huge, and it'd be impossible to put a number on. But our monthly dinners, when we did our monthly kind of dinner and dances, which is the first party we did one of those every month for about 7 or 8 years. Now we do them much less frequently. And they would have, 200, 300, 400 people attending each one. And again, we would open the doors up later for people who just wanted to come for a great party. So, a lot of people.
Do you know what's amazing is when we spoke, I interviewed you before. At that time, you had about 50,000 followers on, I think, your Facebook page.
Yeah.
What I find fascinating about this, so we're now a number of years after that initial interview, and and you've more than doubled the number of people that you're communicating with. And this is something I want the viewer to really grasp, is the fact that you don't have now you have a physical location, but the basis of where these people are going is not a dedicated space. It requires you to, on the pure basis of reputation of that experience that you're creating, it's word of mouth. It's drawing people to you. There's a lot of devices that businesses use to basically bring customers in the door. But I haven't probably seen a better example of a business that absolutely relies wholly on its reputation to bring the next set of customers to the next event.
Yeah, but for me, that is what hospitality is. Hospitality is a promise that we will look after you and that you will pay for that and that you will feel fulfilled and that you've got your money's worth. All hospitality is a promise. What we have done is just focus on that promise as opposed to try and create I kind of want to say false reasons why people might want to come to a particular location. So people go and eat in particular places because they're in the middle of town, or because they're just down the road, or because they have or because they have a beautiful Instagram-friendly kind of interior fit out, or they have a celebrity chef, or they've had a fantastic review. All of those things are incredibly important, but they're not always about hospitality. They're not always about the fulfillment of the promise at the table. And that is our core message, that it doesn't matter where you're going to travel to. It doesn't matter where we're going to take you to. Come to us and we're going to fulfill that promise. And for us, if you focus on that, then you don't need a front door.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's the thing that you do every day. But from another side of things, from a business strategy standpoint, I can tell you it's something that I don't think a lot of businesses get. Like, we've all been, I remember a phenomenally terrible meal of pasta and pizza I had in the center of Rome. It's like, how could you get this wrong? It's Italy, it's Rome, and these are easy things to make. How do you screw that up as badly as these guys do? You know what? Because they go, we got the physical location. Who gives a shit? It's tourists, they're not coming back. They don't care. Like, either they don't, my own experience, because I am so, interested in the food space, is that a lot of people simply don't understand the chemistry in the way that you do. So it's quite interesting. Now, one of the things that I've always been really fascinated by is the fact that your business, the creation of your business, literally is the embodiment of the saying, necessity is the mother of invention. So can you take us back and share the story of where were you at and what led to the creation of the business in the way that you created it?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, the core, the kind of the foundation of the business is the very wide and broad experience that myself and my business partner and head chef Fred have had through working in hospitality all of our lives. So we've both studied, we've both educated, we've both wondered what we were going to do when we were growing up. But whilst we were doing that, we were working full time in hospitality. We're both in our mid-40s. We've both been working since our mid-teens. We've both been working for 30 years now in this space, and we both work very broadly, very widely in internationally, at very high-end places, medium-end places, at high-volume places, and lots of more difficult spaces like doing high-end kind of restaurant experiences in music festivals. We were amongst the first to be doing that in the British music festival scene, but employed by other people. So we would be employed by restaurants or drinks brands or festivals themselves to provide an element of higher end hospitality for, not necessarily for VIPs, but for kind of particular guests or whatever it might be. And so that meant Fred and I understood that if you don't take it somewhere, it's not there. Because once you're in the field, you're completely, you don't have any support. It's very, it's not like you're in the center of London. You can nip out to get the ingredients for a vegan meal that you've forgotten about. It's, you have to have everything. So we kind of, when we started doing these events and parties, we were used to the idea that you could literally start with nothing, write a list, put it in a vehicle, transport it, go to a location, set something up, and that you could hire it in, you could borrow it, you could do it very much on the fly, because we were often working with people for people who were doing things on the fly. So we kind of just did that ourselves, but fundamentally we had I'd come to the end of a period of work. Fred was kind of looking for what he next wanted to do. And I just decided I would throw a party, and the economics worked because we were able to sell tickets in advance. And then because we then had the access to the ticket money, we would then be able to pay for stuff, which we would then be able to use to look after people. And then hopefully there was something left over for us, and then people would leave happy. So it was like a £0 entry business. And we did the first party and we lost no money, and, amazing. Then we did a second party and we made a small amount of money. And the first party was 30 people. The second party was 60 people. The first party were 30 friends who we'd invited. They all came back for the second one and brought a friend with them. That's why it was 60 people for the second one. And the third one, we had 150 people in the basement of a gallery and we didn't know a single person. And we had no idea how anybody had heard about us, but they had. And they had gone onto a very basic website and a very basic Facebook page. And they bought a ticket. And at that point, I was kind of like, right, well, there are lots of ways we can make this a more permanent thing. And then, I kind of quit my job and I had basically £3,000 on a credit card. And I just was kind of like, well, I need to make rent the next month. So I'm just going to keep working. And if I can't make rent, I'll have to stop doing the business. And then the next month I could make rent. And then the next month again, I could make rent. And so could Fred. And so Fred quit his job. And we just kind of grew it that way. And then what money we did make, we invested in buying equipment and putting ourselves in a position where we could do a better and better job and make more money as the business grew. So, we had a fairly unique skill set, and we had the get up and go to kind of make it happen, and make it cool and put out the right kind of messaging. But we had zero funds. It was just a case of let's keep doing this until it falls over or we fall over or we have to go and get a proper job. And, we're a bit,
I remember
13 years on, it's kind of the same.
Right. Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up. And I want to reserve this, answer this question later in the interview, which is, I was going to ask you, like, 13 years later, do you feel like you've got it nailed? Like, or do you still go, because your business, if you have a physical location, you've got 13 years of knowing that 100 people come in every day.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good sign that 100 people are going to show up tomorrow. But in your business, it's completely the opposite of that. You've got to reinvent constantly to bring the next group in. And that's, so I want to come back to that question a little bit. But going back to the idea of that necessity being the mother of invention was, I remember you described a situation in which you were kind of wandering around. You wanted to be in the restaurant business. And at the time we spoke, I think the amount it took on average to start a restaurant in London was about £250,000. So here you are with a small pot of money and you're thinking, I want to be in the restaurant business. But obviously with small pot of money, there's a mile between that and the 250 grand you needed. You had to think differently. And I remember you saying to me that not having money was a huge advantage in retrospect. Can you explain that exactly? How did that become an advantage?
Well, because we didn't have the money. And so if you've got the money, you'll spend it. If you don't have the money, what have you got to spend? So for us, what we had to spend was the value of our experience and a lot of creative thinking and a lot of enthusiasm and dedication to get something done. We were very, very, we really loved our first few dinner parties. We wanted to make this work. So we would spend whatever we had available, which wasn't cash, to make something work. And things like moving, working in the kind of spaces that we were using. We were using spaces that had like an industrial purpose Monday to Friday and had no value on a Saturday because they were closed, which means we could borrow them or get hold of them for very low amounts of money, roll in, build our kitchens, build our restaurant space, build our bars, put our lighting in, put a sound system in, make it all work, bring in the staff, train the staff for the service for that day. And then at the end of the night, pack it all away again. And then that industrial purpose of that building could carry on a Monday morning as though we were never there. That's the Disappearing Dining Club. But we were, if you had money to spend, you'd hire an event space, and an event space comes at a cost. And then you do the maths, but it won't work, or it's very tricky to make work. And by the fact that we had no access to funds, but we had access to a lot of creative thought and a lot of underground knowledge of spaces from going out partying or whatever it might be. That we were just using everything we had available to make something work. And that just opened door after door after door after door about the fact that people wanted to help us because they could see that we were enthusiastic. They knew we were professional because we had the track record within our own careers. And yeah, I mean, but what are you going to do? I mean, it's kind of like, if you want to do it, you either, you're not going to get the money from the bank. I don't have wealthy parents to draw upon. I don't know. I didn't know anything about investors or investment or how to pitch for this kind of thing. I didn't know any better. I just, it was a case of, we're going to do this. Let's do this. And the lack of money became, you had to find other solutions to the problem. And those solutions became the character of our business. And that character communicated itself and people were attracted to it. And then we looked after them, and then they told their friends, and then they came back.
I remember there's such a vivid image in my mind that you described one time when you said you were standing outside of a clothing shop after it had closed. It was the evening, and you looked in and you said, the interesting thing about retail is it's designed to be beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what's interesting is that when you looked at that space, you imagined it already was built to be beautiful, but what if you put a table in the back end? And I think it's that bizarre, the juxtaposition of two different kinds of businesses creating an exceptional experience that I've just always found so fascinating. Because, please go ahead.
Restaurateurs spend a fortune on making spaces look like people's homes. People want comfortable environments to eat in. Restaurateurs are inspired by people's homes and their leather chairs and their sofas and their carpets and their objects on the wall. I'm assuming you're in your home, but behind you there's some shelves and some stuff there. That this kind of stuff is. Restaurateurs fill spaces with things that are there to make people feel homely or have a particular kind of character. Retailers just fill their spaces with stuff they're selling. And that in itself creates an exceptional and unique environment based on the kind of retail space it is. So for me, it's a complete no-brainer. Stick a table in it, put some chairs around it, get some nice people in that table, bring the lights down. You're in a wonderful space because the retailer has curated that space to make it comfortable for its audience already. And then again, if you put a dining table in it, then I think the customers get two kinds of versions of that experience at the same time. They get the retail space, which has already been purposed for making people to be attractive and make people be attracted to that space. But then they also get this, we're getting it in a different way with the lights down and its candles. And maybe should we even be here? And again, it's kind of like there's a specialness to being in that kind of environment. And so for me, I see spaces and I just think, wouldn't this be? I would love to be here with a cocktail in my hand and some friends to chat to. What a wonderful place this would be to have some nice music playing in the background once the doors are shut. And then
amazing.
We just apply what we do to those spaces.
And how much of that do you still do? Like,
a lot.
How many are you? Sorry,
yeah, I mean, a lot now. Because we're now hopefully in this post-COVID space, there's a lot of people spending money in London at the moment who want to do special things that bring people together in the real world in a safe environment, which means they don't necessarily want to go to a restaurant where there's another 500 people or 300 people or 200 people in the room. They want their department or their group of friends to be in a nice environment and bring people together. And they want things to be special because they've not been able to do that for the last couple of years. And there's also a lot of spaces now that have maybe had it easy for the last 10 years in terms of what their main purpose is, who were very attracted by the idea of getting a new revenue stream by us hiring those spaces in the evening. So at the moment in London, there's a real resurgence in people who want to socialize carefully, respectfully to each other, but in a way that is memorable and in many ways protected from the outside world. And we're getting a lot of new business from people who feel that we're a good solution to that. Equally, we're dealing with lots of new spaces who like the idea that we can use their space for that, because every time we rent a space, that's a new revenue stream, and it can often attract new customers to their business.
Of course.
So we're doing a lot of that again now.
So obviously, your sector was devastated. I would imagine that your business in particular would be devastated by COVID. And so it's great to hear that in a way, I suppose you're exactly right. Doing something special, connecting with people, is so much more poignant now than perhaps it was before COVID, when we had the freedom to do whatever the hell we wanted. So it's great to hear that the business is resurging the way it is. So I'm going to ask you, put you on the spot a little bit. So recount the best and the worst customer experience story that you can recall.
For me personally, or within my business?
Within your business.
Sorry, I'm going to push back on that again. When you mean the worst customer experience, as in when we've done our job the worst.
Yeah, so good. I'm glad you qualified that. So I'll just lay the table a little bit differently. For instance, I recall a story you told me one time about encountering a woman outside of one of your events that was sick.
Yes.
I'd love to hear you recount that story. But likewise, as you say, you're seating people together that don't know one another. And it's like, that has the potential for disaster. So in that sense, I'm assuming you guys always did a great job. Yeah.
Yeah, no, there'll be countless stories of people who've sat next to each other and haven't necessarily engaged with each other or have tried to. There's no requirement for people to do that. If people wish to, great. I'm not aware of any kind of fights. I'm not aware of any kind of real kind of major issues. I think people have been asked to move. I think that's definitely happened. But equally, we know, we hear a lot more about the kind of the people that become friends forever. We have a number of people who met at our dinner dance parties, who then we then did their engagement party, their wedding party, their 30th birthday party, now their 40th birthday party. We have lots of those kinds of things. But the story you refer to is a lady who was sat at a place called Townhouse, which is an old Georgian Huguenot weaver's house, a very it would have been built in the 1740s in East London. There would have been lots of these, rows and rows and rows of these houses built at the time, but now there's only a few left, and they're very kind of, they're protected and they're beautiful properties. And we have access to one of these to host dinners, and we would hold very small public dinners there, so people would buy tickets, and it'd be 22 people around a table, so very intimate. And it's dining in a kind of in one space, and there's a little scullery kitchen downstairs. And people go downstairs and meet the chefs afterwards, and we'll have a chat and a drink, and maybe even the dessert will be served downstairs with the chef. And it's kind of very intimate and really fun. And there was a lady upstairs who was looking really ill, sat on a chair on her own, and she was looking white. She was looking very poorly. So I went and spoke to her to ask her how she was. And I saw that she was pregnant, and we'd been serving seafood that evening. And I was like, oh my goodness, maybe there's a problem here. Maybe I was, a bit concerned. I'm going to make sure I look after this lady to see what's going on. And I asked her how she was, how was the food, and she explained that she hadn't eaten anything because she was feeling poorly. So it was a big relief. That's, she's feeling poorly. It's not because of us. And she's like, it's because I'm pregnant. I just get very nauseous at the moment. And I was like, oh my goodness. And then we had a little chat, and I explained that I was the host, and then she was like, oh, because it's your fault I'm pregnant. And I was like, I don't seem to remember. I don't think we've met before. And then she explained that she'd met her partner, her partner at one of our kind of early dinner dance parties, and they'd met that evening. They'd then gone home together that evening. She'd then become pregnant that evening, and this was their kind of second or third date into their relationship.
Oh, God.
And yes, that was which was a fantastic story. And we then did their engagement party, and we did their wedding,
That's awesome.
which was great. And we've got a number. We have kind of like in our extended Disappearing Dining Club family, we have a number of families, the extended families that you know about, which are great. Even within our staff group as well, which is
that's awesome, man. That's great.
Which is more heartwarming.
Yeah, that's awesome. So just two remaining questions. My first one is, how long did it take you to feel like, even though your business is one of constant reinvention, that it was stable and that you could predict it? You're now, married with a child and your business partner as well. Obviously, you need stability in the business. How long did it take for you to get there and feel like this is something we could keep going with?
If I'm honest, the first from between 2010 and early 2010 through till about 2016, everything moved so quickly all the time. It wasn't something we even thought about. It was just constantly working, moving forward, growing the business. And it was about generating success and keeping momentum. Changing the business as we did in 2018, when we had a couple of years of reflection in terms of, and in that couple of years, I got married, Fred got married, we both had children, and we both moved a little bit further out of central London. And then there had to inevitably be a bit of a change, because rather than just working as we were doing, that wasn't sustainable. And so we took on a really, really troubled, slightly ropey backstreet pub in North London, thinking that was a good foundation for stability. And then we worked very hard on that for a couple of years. We then kind of went into COVID, and we've now come out of it now, and we're feeling in a good place now. I would say that I don't think you can ever think you're totally stable. I think if you work for yourself in the way that we do, it always feels like there's a bogeyman around the corner that we haven't accounted for yet. But it feels that, obviously we've had COVID, so COVID was a kind of a pretty big shock. But coming out of COVID, we actually feel like we're in the best place ever for us to keep building in many ways.
So last question is this, like as a wizened veteran whose business has basically lasted beyond the majority, what would be the three key pieces of advice you'd offer to somebody? What were the things that you think were philosophically the biggest issues that made the difference for you? Or not issues, the most significant kind of ways of thinking or approach that made a difference for you?
I think one of the lessons we've certainly learned is to know our strengths and to play to those. Our strengths are the quality of our food, the quality of our drinks, our view on how people should be looked after, and the kind of unpredictability of the spaces we occupy. that is the core value of our business. If ever we've ventured towards something that's maybe more conventional, it's not felt right and it's not necessarily done very well. Whenever we've tried to do something a little bit more imaginative, but move away from the core values of what people are getting at the table, then again, it's not kind of really felt right. And sometimes it's done worked out well, sometimes it hasn't. Knowing what your real values are and what your core strengths are, I think is the most important thing. And just I think that's been really key. The second thing is working with like-minded people and taking the time to build the right working relationships within your own business. Myself and Fred were fortunate enough to have worked together for quite a long time on and off before Disappearing Dining Club. So we already knew each other's strengths and weaknesses and how to work together. And our relationship and the level of communication that we have between us constantly is really, really important. You know, we live very different lives. We do very different jobs. He trusts me completely. I trust him completely to go to work every way to do our jobs. And the reason why we do that is because we talk a lot, and we talk more than anything about our people, our staff. 80% of what we talk about is about our staff. So it's about, so we've got, you know, knowing our strengths, having the right kind of relationships within your own business, and working towards looking after the people within your business, because that is the most important thing. And I think the third thing is just to keep looking up, and keep looking ahead. At the most difficult times for our business have been when we've been a bit introspective, and when we've failed to be thinking about the 3, 6, 12 months. Even if you can't see that far into the future, you can at least hope that far into the future. And I think it's a real tricky balance. I find it one of the most challenging things in my job is I find it very easy to be in my laptop and working on the business, within the business. And that will be something that can consume all of my time.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
I find it very difficult to do that and at the same time be looking up and looking ahead and being a leader and seeking opportunities and looking for solutions, other different solutions to problems, and keep moving the business forward. But actually, that's the bit I enjoy the most. That's the bit I'm best at. That's the bit that made the business exist in the first place.
Right.
So I find it's finding the balance between those two things I find really, really tricky. But you don't have a business if you're just focused on the nuts and bolts all the time. It's very important, but you've got to look up. You've got to look forwards. You can't think it's done. No day is done. And I think I don't know much about other industries. I know about this about my industry. Is every day is I have to have an idea that every day is going to be better than yesterday, and whether that's in terms of how the staff are briefed, how clean an environment is, how good the food is, how well we communicate. We've got to try and be better tomorrow than we were today. And that's the work of today, is to look after people so we can look after people better tomorrow. And that's, again, it's the same thing. Those are the things that kind of consume us, really. Who we are, who our people are, and who the next people are in many ways.
I mean, that last point to me is, particularly with your business, is so critical. It's like you just simply don't have the ability to take for granted that everything that's brought you success is your reputation, and you're only as good as the next event. I mean, that is so true in your case. It's incredible.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I mean, that's the same in every retail experience, surely. That's the same in every online retail experience. If you don't fulfill your promise, then you don't deserve to exist. And
listen, I hear you, but I mean,
that's what I feel very, very much in the depths of my heart, particularly when it comes about food and drink, which is all about people's hearts.
Yeah, I think that you are taking for granted how good you are at it, because I don't think that's true with a lot of businesses. So, but anyway, I mean, I so applaud you and everything you've done. And so, Stu, thank you so much for spending time.
No
Such
worries,
a great story. And I look forward to the next chapter in your business, hearing more.
Great to see you again.
You too. Thanks so much for sticking to the end of our interview with Stuart Langley, founder of the Disappearing Dining Club. Being strapped for cash and transitioning out of a comfortable career to create one of your own is no easy feat. But Stuart is living proof that it's possible, and even more, that being disadvantaged can become a strength later on. And please remember to hit like and subscribe for more great stories of inspired entrepreneurs.